I'm good now.
Yeah, that's a beautiful shot. Okay, that looks good to me. So we're gonna do a little sound. You may have seen that in the old movies where they action.
Action.
So we're just having a conversation, and if there's something you want to restate or start over, oh, I messed up, I want to do that answer again, that's totally fine.
All right.
We're not doing live television, obviously, so
Right.
any mistakes can be fixed very easily.
Okay.
So first of all, thank you for having us here. It's such a beautiful house,
Oh, thank you.
and like you said, you got the George H. Wilson van right outside there.
They're there frequently.
Are
They have an agreement with them.
Oh,
There.
okay. And so I'm curious on a personal level, how long have you been in this house?
About 20 years.
Okay.
And we lived in a wonderful big family home about 20 years ago.
Okay.
And I begged to move, and I finally won. And it's been perfect because the big house, Jim died 2 years ago, and I would have been lost in a great big house. And then he was here maybe a year and a half.
Okay.
Yeah.
And where was the big house that you lived
In Pasatiempo,
Pasatiempo.
43 Hollands Drive. We bought it on a probate sale.
Wow.
Wow.
And you were there for how long?
Oh my goodness, that was, I think, 40 or 50 years.
Wow.
Yeah. I'd have to think about that.
And then here.
And then here.
Okay.
And I'm here. And then I've given this house to Tom and Connie.
Okay. So you mean, yeah, okay.
So legalese,
Yeah,
it will be
yeah.
theirs. And I think it'll be wonderful for them.
Oh my God.
They won't have to do the gardening. Well, Connie loves. Are you doing it now?
We're,
No.
Yeah, we're filming. We're filming. Yeah,
well,
yeah.
I don't have to be so blah blah.
No, you're fine. You're fine. So Connie, what were you saying?
Connie's a gardener,
Okay.
and she'll miss her garden, but there's enough here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And my goodness, they can look out and see the ocean.
Yes, and ride their bicycles. And
Yeah.
that was one of the joys of moving here. Was I was pleased for us, but all of a sudden they all arrived by bicycle,
Yeah.
and so.
And the biking, I'm interesting. That's a family tradition, huh?
It's really
Fat
started
Tom's
with
biking,
Tom.
Tom's.
Tom
Yeah.
and Connie. And
Okay.
Connie now rides all over the world.
Wow.
She came this year. She's did Armenia with a group, and then she and Margaret, my eldest granddaughter, headed to Maine. Did Boston to Maine. Wow.
That's pretty impressive.
Yes.
That's more than I could do. I'll
More
tell you
than
that.
exactly. And Tom daily to work.
Yeah. No, I
Yeah.
know. He said when he said he'd bike over here and meet us here, I was like, oh yeah. I
Oh, he
forgot.
leaves here at dark at night. So.
Good for him. Good
Yeah.
for him.
So bicycling, Alameda's an island, so I have wonderful bicycles, but no incredible efforts like theirs.
Okay.
So
So tell me how it all started. Where and when and how did you meet Jim?
I met Jim on a blind date. I met him on a blind date. Went to my brother's and future sister-in-law's party in Stockton, and a fellow from Santa Cruz said, "Are you dating?" And I said, "No." And they said, "Well, we have several in mind, and two were absolutely impossible." And the minute Jim walked in the door, I saw my mother say, "Oh my God, at last." He had a handsome gray flannel suit and a haircut, and so it was fun.
Okay. And so how long were you together?
About a year,
Okay.
and then we were married.
Okay.
So
And so that was obviously getting to meet him. Then you got to meet the family and the family business.
yeah, oh yes, because
So-
I didn't know anything about business. My father was a farm loan appraiser for the Federal Land Bank, and so he was just off in his car constantly. But I didn't know anything about business, and so forth. It took a long while. I don't know that I ever understood being part of a business family.
Okay.
Oh.
Okay. So what was it? I mean, so obviously you're with Jim, but obviously it's his dad George who is running the company. So at what point in Jim's relationship with the company did you come in terms of George was still in charge? I'm assuming?
George was in charge. Well, I won't say till the end, but at the old office on North Pacific and River, there was this entranceway, secretarial, and then a little curve, and there was a little desk, and then Jim's desk. So you had to either see George before you saw Jim, and this is after progress, and you always thought, well, I wonder what George would have said. That no matter who it was, they saw George first and last. And that's really how it was.
Okay.
And his mother was a true partner of George. They had been, I've tried to think of the night how old they were, but he was really the bib overall plumber of Seabright and all. And she had been in the hat industry, millinery, at least. And they married and transferred from one world of the business from a bib overall to Fortune 500.
Wow.
In their young life.
Wow.
Wow. It was very impressive. And I've often thought back on that I wonder if I would have had the energy and the future thoughts to get into that.
Yeah, so I'm curious about George's wife, her name?
Wave.
Wave, that's right. So what was your perspective on her role in the company in terms of what she did? Because I've heard stories from some of these other folks we've talked to about Wave having a role, but...
Well, Wave had a role because she was in today's world, she would be head of Apple or whatever. She was way ahead of her time as being a successful businesswoman. But she really probably was the role of the secretary, but no.
And what was her relationship with George like, from your perspective?
Oh my. It's hard to think, erase some things. That anything he said went.
Okay.
She probably had influence around there somewhere. Mm-hmm. I don't know how to answer that.
Okay. And what was George like?
Well, George was a self-made man, as I've said. He had very poor hearing, and about within 10 years after I came into the family, he had a miracle surgery by a wonderful man called Dr. Suey, and his hearing was restored, and it was absolutely magnificent. So he changed from shy and to talking. In fact, the old office had a long corridor with where the back counter is here. It was a major corridor, and he'd come in the back door, and they would say, "Oh, here comes old so and so now." And so we all wondered what would happen when he walked by, and they said, "Old so and so's here."
Once he could hear.
Once he could hear.
Yeah.
So he was the triumph of a self-made man. His mother, he was from Wisconsin. His mother had died I believe, shortly after a childbirth, and the older sister, Nell, moved the family out with the father, and they came to Santa Cruz, and he had his eye on property, and it's amazing he didn't own more. Yeah, so.
Okay. Did he and his influence on Jim? What did you see there in terms of how he brought Jim into the company?
Reluctantly. He wanted to be boss to the end. Jim had been in World War II and came home and went to San Jose State. Meanwhile, he had gone earlier to Monterey Peninsula College and then eventually to San Jose. He saw his report card. George saw Jim's report card, and he saw that he was taking some musical thing along with this and this and this, and he said, "Out of here." And he sent him east to school, to engineering school. And so that was rule one.
Against his wishes, or?
I think he was so happy to be home from the war that, and he by then they were successful, so that George and Wade would buy a new car and he always had to drive it home. So I don't think it was terrible.
Okay.
And he made wonderful friends
Okay.
at Milwaukee School of Engineering.
Wow.
So Jim was the estimator and the social person. And if I had a role, it was to increase Jim's social life, because they had been, that had not been theirs. They had close friends, but their attention was Bill George H. Wilson.
So how did you do that? How did you fulfill your role?
I happily. Let's see. Well, I was always with Jim at his different engineering clubs. There was one in Ashray in San Jose. In fact, Jim started the Ashray committee here. He used to go weekly to San Francisco and then finally encouraged them to open a chapter at San Jose. So I socially was there through all of that. And then there was another engineering company, SMACNA, in San Jose. So I was there. I don't know.
Just making connections and
Making connection. I'm a people person, and I was there forward that they hadn't been.
So you worked at the where?
Never.
Oh, okay. No, not there. I'm saying did you have your own sort of career? And
Not until later. Not
Okay.
until later. We had 4 children before you knew it, and I was a volunteer at the hospital and a volunteer here and there. And then when my friend Margie Lesin said there are wonderful shops for women to buy clothes in the East Coast, and I said, "Oh, we're too small a community. Yeah, they wouldn't want to see their own dress walk down the street." And she won, and we opened up the Daisy, and it is still a very vibrant part of the community. So I started the Daisy.
okay.
So,
And how long were you involved with that?
oh, I don't know. I have no idea.
Okay.
10, 15 years.
Okay.
And then I became involved with the museum. And I was a fundraiser for many people. That was my role. That was my social role, a people person role.
Yeah.
And then, let's see, and then about the time that Peter was in high school, a friend of mine who would run Santa Cruz Travel, Jean Epping, said, "What are you doing these days?" And I said, "Well, not much, normal." And she said that her aunt, who had been the organizer and the delivery of tickets, was retiring. And for 8 years, I was the driver for Santa Cruz Travel. And I delivered your airline tickets, probably your father's. And it was wonderful. By then, my mother had come to Santa Cruz to live, and so I would pick her up, and we'd drive to Scotts Valley and all over and deliver tickets. And she knew which gardens she wanted to see, and it made a nice entrance for her to Santa Cruz.
And where had she come from?
She was born in Fresno, then moved to San Francisco, was there for the earthquake, and then the family were in Modesto.
Okay.
And that's where my father's family had Hatch Road in Modesto, had a farm.
Okay.
And so they married, and then there were 2 children, and we lived in Washington, D.C. for 2 years, and then came back west. And they said, take your lily white children, because they'd been through summers and winters in Washington, and live in Alameda. And so they rented in Alameda, and we bought a house 2 doors away.
Wow.
Wow.
And so what your childhood was spent in all of those places?
Well, Alameda.
Oh, okay.
Alameda. I came to, I think I was probably about 4 when we came to Alameda.
From Washington.
From Washington.
Okay.
And so Alameda, I'm surprised that more young people don't come to live in Alameda, because it's flat, it has access to Berkeley and San Francisco, and it's a wonderful place. And you wouldn't catch me out in Walnut Creek where it's hot and cold and foggy and all of that.
Right.
So it was a great, funny place to live.
Okay.
So,
So I'm curious about how it was for you being Jim's wife and Jim running this family business, just in terms of, your perspective on it, and what you saw him going through and what you saw him having to do to
I
make
saw
it all
him being
work.
a juggler, being the spokesman for the company. I saw him being the main bidder. And the bidding is essential at George H. Wilson. I don't know if you've gone through the bidding process at all. I watched him that. Ask me again.
What, just your perspective on it, seeing him go through what he
Right.
went through to run the family business, and
Well,
what
he
that
wa-
did to him, and what it,
Well, I'm still not clear. I'm sorry.
Well, I'm just curious how he did it. How did Jim?
He got up
how
at
did he
4
run
o'clock in the
George A's?
morning and came home at 7 o'clock at night. That's
Okay.
how he did it.
Okay.
He did it out of total devotion to his parents. There had been an older brother, and he died, they were 5 and 7, say, and he swore at that child's death they would never be hurt again. And he never hurt again. And probably to Sue and Jim's flaw,
That's
the
interesting.
devotion.
Yeah.
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 So,
Okay.
so he did it. He wasn't. He didn't know Santa Cruz. He knew the business.
And so that was probably part of your role, was you started to know Santa Cruz.
Oh,
and you
absolutely,
started to-
absolutely. And when Cooper House came, and I mean, I was part of the movers and shakers of downtown.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I want to get into that for sure. So
Oh.
your perspective on, like Tom was saying when we were talking earlier about the changes that Santa Cruz
Yeah.
has gone through since you've been here,
Right.
in terms of how it was when you first got here, and then over the years.
Yeah. So,
What did you see, or what's been the biggest change?
Respect. I was asked one time, what has happened in your lifetime? And I said respect, the lack of respect. And I think that has fingers in a lot of pies of Santa Cruz right now. The people who are for the homeless, the people who are opposed to the homeless, the people who want buildings, want cars and they don't respect each other anymore. They have to have their way.
And that respect was there
Yes.
prior.
Yes. Yes.
even though they had different.
They could have difference, but the respect was there. This respect has been lost in today's world. And it didn't happen overnight.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's slowly changed.
Slowly changed.
And in terms of, you said you were a downtown mover and shaker, so what did you see happen downtown over the years in terms of its growth and its development and George H.'s role in it, right? Because I don't know if you ever saw this timeline they did when they turned 90.
Oh, yeah.
And so all these buildings that they were a part of and these iconic, many of them are downtown. I'm curious your perspective on how you saw that grow.
When I said about the beaches, that people said you go to the beach, you don't need a park. They didn't need gathering spots downstairs. That was all kind of, you don't need that. I don't know if that's clear. When Mr. Abbott came to town, Chuck Abbott came to town, I was what are the words you use, a yuppie or a cult, whatever. And he brought, let's take a second look at Santa Cruz. There was lots of changes in the wire of making downtown a different downtown. And he said, let's take a look at, you've heard the whole story with Chuck Abbott, but I was a groupie. And so it showed up in the museum. It showed up. I worked for a brief time in Stitches and the yarn shop, and so I was part of this group with let's keep. We didn't say let's keep Santa Cruz weird, but we said let's keep Santa Cruz. So yeah.
So you mentioned Jim was in World War II.
Jim was in World War II. Was in the South Pacific, and he had been. For the most part with Australians and building airfields and so forth. And that's how Blue became Blue, because Jim with his red hair was called Blue, because that's what Australians call redheads, and they called blondes Whitey. And so that's where Blue came along with it. And so the Australians were a great influence on Jim. He just loved their vibrant. They were gutsy. They still are.
Yeah.
Whether they're too gutsy sometimes. We visited Australia. I found Australia very, very difficult. And this was, oh gosh, I wish I could bring back the years, but maybe late 70s, 80s, we were in Australia. And Jim said, let's go have a beer in the pub. And so I went in, and I was immediately told to get out. I mean, you're not welcome, lady. Why didn't you read the sign? So I had to leave, and then he paid the bill and came out. He was a gentleman. And then we tried to make decisions on where else we wanted to visit, and we went to a travel agent, and the agent would only talk to Jim, and he had no interest in what I wanted to do. And I was stunned. I had never been treated that way. And so we left, and I remember openly crying on the street. And we just sort of did it for ourselves from then on. But that part of Australia I did not care for, and I don't know how it is now. Yeah. With women.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's sad.
Well, it is sad, because that was many, many, many years ago.
Yeah.
So we had traveled with Jean and Leslie, which is Santa Cruz Lumber, and Norman and Margie Leslie, which is a tannery, and we had done New Zealand, both north and south, and we had had wonderful relationship with John Doe, and so they did not go on with us. So we were kind of lonely and not knowing how to maneuver, and to have had that unattractive reception.
Right.
Yeah.
So, and how long was Jim in the war?
Oh, well, 41 till 45,
Okay.
and then came back and went to Monterey. I think it was Monterey College.
Monterey, Cal State Monterey, whatever.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Can I fold my legs?
Yes, of course. You do whatever you need to do to be comfortable. Of course.
Thank you.
Whatever you need.
So, he, he grew up in the war, as the young men did.
Yeah. It was kind of that generation.
It was that generation, and had many, many friends through the years that went back to picking up or something. And matter of fact, Tom's wife, Connie's father, had been in kind of the same role, and they had first met at that waiting for the draft, or waiting till they could be enrolled.
Wow.
And then they, of course, became part of the family. So the war years for that generation, the greatest generation, is really sad to me that military-wise doesn't have the respect or the friendships and the strength that it once did.
Mm-hmm.
And good wars, bad wars have helped and hindered.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely. I'm curious about Santa Cruz after the war, in terms of how it grew.
Well, interestingly, when we were in New Zealand, a little spot that's not coming to mind the name right now, Les and Jim immediately said, "My God, this is Santa Cruz. This is Santa Cruz in the 30s, the Santa Cruz they knew." And it was this quiet little nobody town. I wish I could think of the name, but I can't. So,
And then
So-
and then
so the Santa Cruz, you want to know the growth?
after the war.
After the
how it
war.
grew.
I really wasn't part of that.
Okay.
I didn't come till 55.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, obviously that was after that. So you came, 55, were you here for the flood of 55?
Oh, yes, we just had our first baby. And we'd gone to Christmas parties. And what was the flood? What was December 55?
55,
Was December.
yeah.
Yeah, I didn't want to make it November. He knew there were problems coming. As a matter of fact, called somebody to say that the River Street Bridge was in trouble. And, let's see. The changes.
Well, what are your memories of the flood, though?
Oh.
Was it just, I mean, because I've seen pictures, but I'm just curious. your
Well, I was
perspective
just
on-
home from the hospital, November 26th, so I didn't see much of it.
Okay, you didn't get out, you were taken care of.
I was in the house with a new baby,
Yeah.
and a dryer that wasn't working was supposed to save my life. And when we started having to boil water, my mother and father said, "You come to Alameda and stay," because Jim wasn't home. He was round the clock working with the flood.
So you moved back.
So I
out
moved, I went, yes,
For how long?
oh, 10 days,
Oh, okay.
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, yeah, because I'm curious, obviously, the role that the flood played in terms of Santa Cruz having to rebuild and recover, but then obviously the role that George H. played in
Well,
that
not
recovery.
only played, but their whole office was flooded. So they had to take care of their own things down the thing, so they were essential because there were problems.
Yeah, like I said, it looked like it. I've seen the pictures.
Yes.
They're like,
Yeah,
whoa, this
and in
must
fact,
have been-
it's hard for me when people talk about there was a flood in the 80s, and I just erase that, That was nothing.
Well, I was gonna, yeah, so the 82 flood was nothing.
Nothing
like
to
the
me.
55 flood.
Right.
Because I went through the 82 flood,
Yeah.
and that was pretty crazy.
It
but-
was crazy. We were leaving for the Orient the next day, and or within the next few days, and we had to go up the coast because we couldn't go over the hill. I'd forgotten about that. And when we were in Seattle waiting for a plane to take us the east, we were in a store buying the last little toothbrush or what have you, and there was Santa Cruz Pacific Avenue with the president and everybody on front of Time magazine. So
That's
So we
amazing.
left you in the lurch and we went off for pleasure. But it was difficult. It was
Yes.
difficult. And that changed a lot. That was pretty much the go-ahead to change Santa Cruz.
And what are your memories of what Jim was going through at that time
Oh.
in terms of,
Round the clock.
yeah,
Round the clock. And I remember there was some mechanical equipment that was needed, whether it was pumps or what have you. He knew that Fort Ord had them, and he went over and saw to that they gave us the essentials, his essential tools.
right,
So
that's great.
yeah, so it was very much his role. So
And I've talked to some of the longtime employees there about what kind of a boss Jim was, or just what kind of just a leader he was. And they describe him, they all basically agree that he had an incredible attention to detail, even
Oh, yeah.
into his 90s, where he's like, hey, that's off, hey, that needs.
oh yes, and that had come from his parents, but he went into more details, and he was there with that.
So he had, you saw that. In
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. Anyway, he was a very good leader, and I was in the shop not long ago, and one of the older employees said, I miss him wandering through the plant and saying, hello, John Doe, and how's your family? And he said he circulated. He knew the good and the bad of what was going on, and he saw to it that they found out that he knew.
Right, yeah, that's what they would say, is they, in a subtle way, they would, hear, oh, hey, we gotta do this, but it was like, he made sure they knew.
Oh yeah,
By
there was no.
telling a middle person or someone to.
Yeah, there was no. He didn't fib. He may have fibbed in a way, but he let them know that they were wrong, and there were those who drove too fast with the truck saying where I am and who I am, and he let them know. So,
That's
but the respect was there.
Yeah,
The respect was there, from both sides.
right.
Yeah.
And you think, and we talk about George, I mean, obviously now we're in the third generation, so do you think that's kind of the standard that George had set, and then
Yes.
Jim kind of
Yes.
carried that
Yeah.
on?
There isn't. Well, I don't see the action of the office. Tom's been marvelous as the people person, and Bluey is the stern one. And but I don't know that they walk around the office and they have those fingertips. I don't know if they have fingertips.
Okay,
I don't have no idea.
right.
And
Which you're saying that Jim did have?
Jim did.
Yeah,
Jim had a, totally. He knew. And I think George knew a lot, but there was mostly what he wanted them to know. I think Jim was freer at their wishes.
okay.
So
I'm curious, we've now met all four of your kids, who are just great people. I'm curious what they were like as kids.
well, I've been thinking about this. Before I get into that, I will say that Sue gave them smiles, warmth, happiness, and Jim gave them backbone. And between the two of us, they got the rest. But the grandparents on both sides of the family had a great deal, especially Tom and Blue and Julie. Peter came along. He's 10 years younger than Tom. And so that influence was lessened. So ask me again.
All right, what were they like as kids in terms of?
Oh, they were.
Yeah.
Well, having boys 15 months apart,
Yeah.
they became endeared friends for life, and that was wonderful. And they really had a marvelous time together. And about the time Tom was in junior high, before Bluey, he was missing on certain Saturdays and things because he had new friends and who played big roles in that. And Bluey was looking down, and I said, Bluey, you know, you're going to have to find some friends of your own. Tom has gone on. And so shortly after that, we lived on a hill. He was roaring down on his bicycle, and where are you headed? He said, out to find new friends. So they were devoted to each other and always worked together. And then came Julie, and Julie was, let's see, she was this pretty little girl who's simply was by herself. She wanted to be by herself. She was at her best by herself. She's an artist. In her youth, she horseback rode, and there's a lot of alone comfort for her time. And as far as the boys, I think they just simply put up with a little sister. I don't think they disagreed with her. They simply put up with her. I think probably in honesty, boys and girls would say that about one another.
Well, I was going to say, I'm sure she put up with them too.
Yes,
Right?
yes. And so by the time Peter came, I'd had it. You know, I truly had done all I could. And so Peter got away with murder. By then I was really downtown. And so he would go to Mission Hill and come by the office there. And he knew directions when I was at the museum. He knew Johnny's bicycle shop. And wherever I was, I had little maps drawn where from Johnny's, how he'd get to the museum, how he'd get to Cooper House, how he'd get to places. And so he grew up like Topsy.
That's great. I remember Johnny so well.
Oh, it was a very important. You know, I think that we probably have never realized what kind of a hub Johnny's was.
Oh, yeah.
I can't remember the fellow's name, but I think he ruled a lot of these kids.
Oh yeah.
Influence.
There was Mike, but then there was another guy. Yeah, I remember him. I can.
Yes. I want to remember, but they were very important. In fact, it was long before. What is it? The Boys and Girls Club.
Yeah.
But the bike shop was.
Oh yeah.
It was a spoke.
Yes, it was. It was. So you draw maps for him.
I draw maps for Peter,
That's great.
so that he could come from Johnny's or wherever it was. Because I was free by then. I just, you know.
Right.
My mother-in-law was a great cook. Sue and Jim were. That was a very strong part of our life. We were great cooks together, and that was really, I would say, one of our top focuses. In fact, I had wanted to have a little party just a short time ago, and Julie was here, and I started to say, and she said, "You and Dad would spend hours and hours planning a party. I'm not part of that."
She didn't want to do that.
It wasn't in her.
Yeah.
What? No,
Oh,
no,
that's good.
no.
So I'm curious then, since you've got these 4 kids and that 3 of them are essentially now running this
Right.
family business, what could you have ever envisioned that when they were growing up? You mentioned Tom and Bluey were pretty close, but Julie now being a part of it down there, what's your, does it make sense to you that they're together, or does it kind of make you say, man, I never could have
Well,
imagined it?
Julie made the right choice with Eamon, her husband, to be the father of their children, but not to be the husband. And he was a farm boy from Ireland, and was superstitious. And it was interesting. He was a carpenter, and he was fearful that they'd make him work at the office. And so he held back. And I'd someday like to have the nerve to say what was so frightening about a given position. But something was.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Interesting. So Julie's part of the business didn't come until her marriage dissolved. And he remains close to the family, with the children especially. And so she had different jobs, but nothing in particular. But when she really, I don't know what brought her to the office, but I don't see that that's where she was. I mean, I don't see that was the direction I would have thought.
Right.
Right.
Well, it seems like, so we talked to Julie and Peter together, and then we talked to Baloo and Tom, and it seems like, she's, obviously a huge part of it, but
Oh, absolutely.
happy to be there, and they get along for the most part.
Absolutely. And she is, with the transition of the company, she's less and less with the mechanics of the red truck going out, and more in the billing and that end of it. And I think that that's better for her. I think that I think it was hard for her because she's very sensitive. I think it was hard for her to, when the business was announced that the sale was coming about, she heard bitching in the background, and what'll happen to us, and I think that was very hard on her. And I think being away from the grumble area, I mean, I'm not saying that they grumble, but they're less heard than the front desk. And so they feel free to grumble if it deserved.
Right.
And I'm glad for her she doesn't have to hear it. It's nothing ever been serious, but I think you know.
Yeah, I get it.
And Peter, the 10 years difference is huge. Physically, mentally, on and on and on. And he went to Reno, Nevada, the university, to graduate and became a geographer as well as Tom. And he went on with a company that then he's with Telefonica, and it's the same kind of mapping and all. He was uncomfortable at the company. I don't know if he spoke to that, but it didn't gel.
Yeah.
It didn't gel. I don't recall anything explosive, but it simply didn't gel. And he's a people person, Peter.
Yeah, definitely.
So he's now in with his office. Office was in his home, and then Miami, and then the main office for Telefonica is in Madrid. So I'm very proud that I said, what in the hell are you doing in Santa Cruz when you have your son in Virginia, your mother and father-in-law, elderly in Florida? Go.
Yeah.
And they've just left.
Yeah, that's what he told
In
me.
fact, half of this crap here is their stuff.
They're leftovers.
They're leftovers. Well, yes, leftovers come from cupboards, and then Jim's office got rearranged with some furniture just recently, and all that came. And I thought, just about the time I thought I'd done it with Jim's things, more came.
More.
So it's hiding behind the couch.
That's good.
So, anyway, Peter loved working at the shop, and they all, with the exception of Julie, worked as teenagers all summer long. In fact, we vacationed as a family at Christmas time because they didn't have summer vacation. They worked at the shop.
Wow, that's interesting.
And Tom and Bluey would go off crack of dawn, and they took turns in making sandwiches, and Tom was more dry sandwich and Bluey was more mayonnaise sandwich, and so just about noontime Bluey would say, "Oh damn, it's Tom's day." So anyway, so Peter was about, I'd say 14, and he had older friends and older brothers and sisters, and one of the most was Buzzy Butler, was a very important Ernie's bicycle spot, and he influenced Peter in getting some boots, some wonderful boots, and Peter just really thought he was somebody with these boots, and they sent him in the truck to Wrigley's Gum, and there was a problem of the gum gummed up, and so the plumbers and the whatevers, mechanics, went in, they couldn't get in, so they had to send Peter, and so Peter had to go in these big machines, but the boots got gummy, and that's probably why he didn't work at George H. He made a decision at 14. I don't want my boots to get gummy.
My Buzzy Butler boots.
My Buzzy Butler boots. So, did you know Buzzy?
I did. Well, I knew of him. He was a little older than me, but
Yeah.
I used to go watch him play basketball
Yeah.
at Harbor because my brother was his age, and
Oh.
my brother knows Peter.
Oh, well, so he knows.
Yeah.
He knows Peter.
Yeah.
Peter's my father again. A people person. Tom has a lot of it, but Peter has that. In fact, not long ago there was a picture of Peter he sent me through email or whatever it is, and I thought, my God, I'd really forgotten how much they looked alike.
Yeah.
You get to interview Louis Butler, uncle of Buzzy.
No.
Well, our next door, with the success of George and Wade, which I really just cannot tell you how I admire that couple, working night and day to become a company with excellence. It's qualified work, and I can't say enough. I wasn't part of it, but I admired what they did because they stood up for what they offered. In their success, they were able to buy and build a home in Pasatiempo, and their friends down the road were Buzzy's family, the Butlers, and Jim and Louis and Vincent were best friends. Vincent is Buzzy's father.
Okay.
You probably saw him at all those basketball games, and so remained close friends. In fact, I have Christmas plans to be in the city, and the very first date to be made was with Louis, to be with him. And so he will be part of your interviewing as the close friend of childhood friends, going to Georgian Waves in Jim's home and having Mrs. Wilson having great food and Eskimo pies around the clock, availability. So you'll hear from him.
Okay.
And
That's great.
yeah,
I
so-
can't wait.
yeah, he's a lawyer, a retired lawyer, and San Franciscan, but this was their summer home. And go back to Jim on this. So you had Lucy, the mother, was widowed, and you had two boys, give or take the same age as Jim, but Jim was older by maybe 2 years, so he had a driver's license. And so Mrs. Butler, Lucy, would let Jim take her car and drive them to the boardwalk and places. And he grew a lot. I'm really glad I came to this because San Francisco was a whole new life to him. He had Santa Cruz and his work and his mother and father, but he was introduced to a whole nother world and he ate it up. He loved it. He became part of a social world of his own in San Francisco. Mm-hmm. There's a group called the Bachelors Club, and it really was for young bachelors, your age, coming. And they would meet they had parties, dances, and various things. And I think it really gave him, an enrichment. He wasn't just the hometown boy. Mm-hmm. He knew the other side of life.
Yeah.
And he loved it.
That's great.
Yeah. In fact, for our wedding, they were all San Francisco with one exception, and the one exception decided he didn't want to be in the wedding and didn't show up.
Wow.
So I'm glad I remembered the San Francisco part because it was very generous on both sides.
That's where you were married?
We were married in Alameda.
Oh, okay.
We were married in Alameda. Okay. But the ushers were all
San Francisco.
All San Francisco.
Okay.
Or Cappy Martin from Carmel.
Okay.
So,
oh, that's great.
And one from Piedmont. Well, Bay Area. Out of Santa Cruz.
Yes.
And I think that was my attraction. I don't think I could have tolerated the little Santa Cruz man. It had to have something else.
Yes, I get it.
In fact, that was the hardest part for me. Not only the beach they didn't do in Santa Cruz, but there were just so many stilts and stop signs and blocks of Santa Cruz. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And I learned to overcome them.
Yes.
So.
I'm curious about your memories of 1989, the earthquake.
The earthquake.
Where were you?
I was packing to go overseas. So I don't really know. I know that when we came home, that's all I could hear. So I simply don't have any memories. I wasn't here.
But you were not here when it struck?
No.
Oh. Okay.
I know nothing of it. I mean, sorry.
Okay.
I know that it happened. But I know that it will never be as big as 55.
Okay.
To me.
Okay. Nothing compared.
I had just come to Santa Cruz, just been married, just had a baby, and it was Santa Cruz. It was what happened.
Right.
So.
Okay, yeah, because the earthquake obviously had a big impact on the town and particularly downtown. But again, it impacted George H. Wilson, right, in terms of the business and in terms of.
Oh yes, yes.
So that's why I was curious. But you
Blank.
were here.
Blank.
Wow. Where were you? Is that when you were in Australia and New Zealand, or?
No. I have a travel bug.
Okay. Okay. Good for you.
And I was Sue and Jim were fortunate, and so were his parents. And Jim, because he could say, I inherited some money from my great aunt, and it was $10,000 a year. And I could say, after years of them saying, Jim doesn't take vacations, Jim doesn't do this, you don't take vacations, you belong to the company. I could say, we can go.
So you got that travel bug?
I got that travel bug, and Jim was able to say, I'm going. And then,
How hard was that for him?
oh, I'm sure very hard. I'm sure it was very hard to tell them. And we often travel in the winter because of work, a lot of that. And George's birthday was in February, and we would go various locations, but would never before George's birthday.
Okay.
So to the last of George, he ruled.
That's great. And George worked there, do you remember, until he was how old?
Oh goodness, I have no idea how old he was, but
'Cause
Tom
Jim
and
was
Blue,
there till he was
93.
93.
He died at 93, and 6 weeks earlier he was going daily and driving daily. Yeah.
Wow.
So I can't really bring back on George's when he working. I know that I pushed for him to retire, George to retire, because I wanted Jim's turn
Right.
for Jim. And so I made up things for George to do. We were neighbors. And so the boys needed haircuts. George, take them to get a haircut. George, they wanted to go to a ball game. George, take them to a ball game. So I instrumentally pushed George out the door. I didn't get anywhere, but I made efforts.
Yes.
So
That's great.
yeah.
Okay, so you weren't here for the earthquake, but obviously you had to have returned at some point after the earthquake.
Right.
So what are your memories of when you got back? Because I'm sure obviously it had changed, the downtown had changed.
Tell me exactly about the '89.
So the '89 was the big one. It was the Loma Prieta earthquake and the downtown, the Cooper House,
Right,
collapsed,
right.
and all those iconic downtown buildings had come.
Actually,
And it became uninhabitable, and
right.
they had to try and rebuild it, and
Yeah.
so
I-
like the bookshop was in a tent.
Yeah,
or-
now I remember all.
Yes.
I was a driver for Santa Cruz Travel, delivering to Watkins Johnson in Scotts Valley, and I came down the hill from Watkins Johnson, and the lights were swinging, and I thought, what's that? I thought I'd lost control of the car, and that was the '89 earthquake. And so then I continued on the way, and I saw smoke, and it was the bricks, and so those are the bricks. And so now it's all, thank you for that. It's all coming back clearly because obviously downtown was just bricks coming up. We were leaving for the Orient, that's where we were going. And so I was outside the house because we were still having tremors. And a friend of ours who was a United Airline pilot stationed in the Orient, in Hong Kong, walked by, and I said, well, we visited over shakes, and he helped me plan. I had been to Hong Kong before, but this would be Jim's first, so he gave me what Jim would like to see in Hong Kong. And we were sitting there. And so, yes, of course, downtown was a mess, and I enjoyed just going to Bookshop Santa Cruz birthday and realizing how much they had contributed with the growth. And that group of 35 redeveloped Santa Cruz. That was really quite a remarkable, I don't know how they were developed and where they came from. I have many friends who were part of that on the stepping stones of how to return. And they did it.
Yeah.
And then, so was that when Chuck
Yeah.
Abbott came in?
Yes.
Yes. So,
it was. It
so
was.
giving back and forth. Uh, it was, I can't really put more to that,
No,
except it was
that's
just
okay.
it was it was more of a Santa Cruz experience rather than a personal experience. Mine had been 55, had my first sign of the importance of George H. Wilson and the importance of part of Jim repairing it
Was 55.
was 55.
Yeah.
And the other was Santa Cruz. And so anyway.
So what, do you remember anything in particular about how Jim was at that time of the earthquake? Like in terms of bringing his work home and saying, oh gosh.
We weren't here.
Okay, so at that point.
We left several days after the earthquake.
Wow.
And so I don't know when Tom came. I don't know if were they here during the earthquake?
They said, I think they said, yes, they were.
Right.
Yeah.
So we were able to go.
Right.
So they will give you the history of George
Okay,
H.
okay.
for the improvement of Santa Cruz.
Okay.
Yes, they gave us our freedom.
Yeah, that's awesome.
And while we're talking about freedom, and then Miss May, remind me that I want to talk about freedom for Tom and Blue and Julie, with the resale.
Yes, definitely. Well, yeah, I mean, that was kind of what, so
Right.
I didn't know that. They didn't tell me that you guys had left after the earthquake.
We left. We left, and we were really, literally in Seattle when Time magazine shows downtown Santa Cruz showing pennies and
Right.
the bookshop and all of it. So when we came back, bookshop. So I don't remember. Was it October?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was October.
The shopping center of bookshop had been developed behind the street. I remember seeing that, and I remember shopping, and I'd been out of town, and I bought something, a blanket, a gift. And when I got home and I saw that they had it downtown in these temporary buildings, I sent it back with a note. I owe Santa Cruz. I don't owe you.
Yes.
And it was a real community feeling of '89.
Yeah, that was my memory of
Yeah.
it as well. Yeah,
Right.
it was just everyone
So
coming
when we
together.
came back, the upstart of recovery was going on. So,
Yeah, and that was a big recovery.
big
obviously.
recovery.
Yeah.
Big recovery. So you'll have to ask the mechanics of the world.
Yes,
the
ask
role.
their perspective.
Right.
Yeah. Okay, so that's actually probably a good thing you weren't here for it.
Well, he would have been around the clock again.
Right, that's what I was going to say.
Yeah.
He wouldn't.
Right.
So he basically, like you said, he worked around the clock, even up till the end.
Up till 6 weeks before he died.
He was still. What around the clock? What did you say it was? 5 in the morning to 8?
Well, it was horrible. Horrible. I mean, always up. He was gone by 6 because they opened the back, whatever, the back counter at 7, I think, something like that. So he was gone, and then home at 7 at night. Less and less through the years.
Right.
Right.
So, and how did you? And you handled that by traveling and.
Traveling and
Raising the kids and-
pouting, and and I remember when Julie was about 5 or 6, maybe school time, and being pissed and braiding her hair, and she'd say, "Stop!" But I would my involvement of not being involved was heavy.
I get it. Yeah. I can imagine. That's what I was curious about. Like, how tough was it for you?
It was very tough. It was very tough because not only did I have new in-laws in my family, but they were the rulers. And they had a lot. George was, they had, old school was strong. Old school was very strong, and I can remember, I don't recall quite the whole circumstances, but George said, I want to talk to you. And I said, oh, no, shiver shake. And he said, you signed a petition downtown. I saw you. And that was a no. You did not do that. And I would,
What was the petition for?
I don't remember, but I signed a petition. I made myself publicly known. And you
took a side.
I took a side.
Yeah.
And I remember crying at his couch. Just, I was whipped into shape.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow, that must have been tough.
It was tough. It was tough. And I'm sure it was tough on them. They had their honor roll, and that was not in the honor roll. Mm-hmm. And I broke a lot of rules. I as I said, I was a people person, and I needed people as much as they needed what I offered. Mm-hmm. And I think they were very proud that I brought that to the family, and very proud that Jim had a social life. Because I think part of a self-made family it's that growth, mm-hmm. that you were part of a community where they had been a sideline.
Right.
And so, but I think it was hard on them that I was outspoken. I think it's the best thing that ever happened to them, whether they would have ever admitted.
I was going to say, well, did they admit that or not, right?
Right. I have to rub my nose through the picture.
No, you're good, you're good. Oh. Yeah, no, that I've been thinking about it. I was like, oh, I get to talk to Sue. This is going to be great. And then as I started to learn the story more and more, I thought, wow, what a remarkable lady to go through what you know. I mean,
well,
to have your husband not.
I had the comfort of their love and their money to be free to be outdoors. And I not many young women were able to have babysitters and the freedom of volunteering. Mm-hmm. And I had that freedom because of them. And but I'm sure both sides, giving it George and Wave and Sue, poor Jim was in the middle. He handled it well, truly. It's, you know, you'll erase that
yeah,
part.
Of course we will. Of course we will.
I'm sure that Jim, I can't think, it was the Oreo cookie.
Okay.
And he had to see both sides, and I'm sure it was very hard on him. I think his brother's death and the warriors. That they might not have a future. Because what would the future have been if he had been called to contribute his life to the war? Mm-hmm. Their dreams would have been shattered. Mm-hmm. So the war was very, very hard on them. And his return, and then returning within 10 years, having their... Anyway, I respect their part of it. And I respect that Sue was gutsy enough to say, go to hell.
Good for you. Good for you.
Silently.
Yes. In your own way.
In my own way.
Yes.
In my own way. So,
good.
So you can use that if you want.
Yes.
I don't care.
Yeah, okay. Thank you. We'll make note of that. So being the people person that you are and being the downtown person that you were, how much pride did you take in seeing what George H. represented in the community in terms of interacting with all these people and, oh, you're Mrs. Wilson,
I didn't get that in the community.
You didn't? Okay.
I did not get that in the community.
That's interesting.
I may think on that, but I got it through his engineering groups, and no, I don't think so. I think Sue and Jim got it attention, but I don't think that. Funny, I have to think about that.
Okay. Well, I just imagine, like we were talking about earlier, the red trucks and just how it's so well known, and the company is so well known for having such a great reputation.
Right.
It's great.
Right. But the reputation wasn't here. They weren't the great builders. They built the hospitals and the jails and the county building and all of that. But they made their world in Monterey and San Jose and Santa Clara, Palo Alto. I think that I think that's interesting. I think that they were known as Jim the golfer. We've not talked about that big role of his, but I don't think that he was known. In fact, he was a Lion, which is a social club, a community club. I guess it's a computer.
Lions Club.
Lions Club, Rotary, all those are community givers. And he got kicked out of Lions. He was delighted. And the reason he was kicked out is because he was always in Monterey or in San Jose and Santa Clara. And it didn't give him a hoot to rush back for the noon meeting. And he missed too many noon meetings. And so out he went.
Oh,
so I think that people probably, I bet many didn't know that he was a success in the outdoor world. I mean, not the outdoor world, but in the outside
Santa Cruz.
Outside Santa Cruz.
Right.
Yeah, because his favorite, well, I shouldn't say favorite. One of his very favorite jobs was community hospital in Carmel, Monterey, and it was his pride, and it was the last major job that he hung on to, and if the community hospital needed help, by God, he was there at the crack of dawn. And hospitals do need more attention because you don't just automatically close down the air conditioning or the heating or whatever, the mechanical end. You have to have Jim Wilson's intelligence to know when and how long. And they respect. But I don't think Mary Brown down the street knew that of Jim.
Okay.
I think he was just nice Jim Wilson, who was a one-handicap golfer.
Was he?
Yeah.
Wow.
Because he moved.
Played past Tiempo.
He moved to Past Tiempo at age 14, and played every day, rain or shine.
Wow.
And then I came along and I kind of spoiled the whole golf world.
You weren't a golfer.
I tried,
Okay.
but the women golfers didn't work.
That's interesting. I didn't know that about him.
Oh no, very, very important. In fact, my project on that table is matchbooks that I've just, out of all the stuff that's been coming, I found a whole box of his collection of matchboxes. So I'm putting them together with also the pencils of George H. Wilson and Community Hospital and all of that right now.
Oh, that's great.
No, he was really a very fine. What are we going to do with my itchy nose?
No, we'll clean it up. We'll cut it.
So, yes, very fine golfer, and traveled the world playing golf. And on one of our trips crossing the Atlantic, um, um, they had a very funny thing out on the deck, and it wasn't on the deck. And they were films of different golf courses around the world, and the golf Del Monte was one, and they had the film background, and then you would show the hole and the fairway and all of that, and then you actually played golf against the film, and and he did well there because the rest of them from all around the world, they didn't know the golf course. He knew it by heart.
Right. Yeah, he knew right where to hit it.
Right, exactly.
That's
So
good.
golfing was a major part of his life. In fact, he went on to, back to George, I have to know,
Okay.
let me see, where was it?
George and the golf.
When they moved to Pasatiempo, they became friends with lawyer Steve Wyckoff and Clyde Carmine, the dentist, and others. And the sale of Pasatiempo came about, and they were comfortable enough with their world to buy stock. And so that's where this attachment with Pasatiempo. And so he always played golf and continued, and then he became president of the golf course. Sam Nye had been one of the main stockholders. He bought Pasatiempo, and he ran it, and they ran it as a company, but Sam ran it as his own kingdom. Did you know any of the Nyes? No.
I did.
Well, it was delightful, but he really did run it as his kingdom, and he ordered milk through the milk company, through Pasatiempo, and all of a sudden the Jim Wilsons and the Vincent Butlers and others said, "Hey, wait a minute, we'd like to run it," and Jim became president.
Wow.
So he was president for numbers of years. In fact, at his death, they lowered the flag at half-mast
Wow.
at the golf course.
That's great.
So it was great.
It
was a great tribute.
That's awesome.
So,
I'm curious, you mentioned how your love of cooking, and I've also heard some of the folks who worked there for a while mention some of the company parties.
Oh,
the
yeah.
Company. So what are your memories of those?
I was a guest.
You were a guest.
I was a guest.
You didn't cook for everybody or anybody?
Never.
Okay.
I wasn't one. It was
So you were a guest, so
I was a
what were
guest.
those parties like?
well, the parties that there were two parties. The Christmas party put on by Jim and his mother and father, and then there were the company picnics. And the company picnics were the big thing.
Yes.
And so you had the Kirbys and the many wonderful people that you've met. I mean, they worked like dogs. They were up at the crack of dawn with wood and fires and meat and endless working. Those are very fine company picnics.
Yeah.
I had gone, my father's company from the farm land bank went to Prudential Insurance Company. And I had been to company picnics, and they were at clubs, and you just arrived. But no, George H. Wilson, you were part of it. Everyone, whether they cooked or not, had a role. They had to bring the chairs, or they had the ice or something. It was a very proud part of their company were these company picnics.
Do you remember some funny stories from any of those, or just crazy times or crazy?
Well, they were groups. They were together. They weren't boss and underlings and plumbers and sheet metal. I think there's always a little sheet metal versus plumbing I don't know that there was ever a role of the difference. I think in the past there was. So I remember the Christmas parties, people being happy to be there. But the summer was a group. They were, I doubt if anyone ever planned not to go to the family picnics.
Yeah, no, like I said, the stories that these guys are telling are just how amazing the picnics were, and then we've heard stories about the boat races and
yeah, yeah, that came. I'm not so sure Jim was so part of that. But that came later.
Okay, what did that entail? Do you remember?
I was completely away from those rules. I'd go as an observer, and there were the bathtub races.
Yes.
So I can't add to any of those, except that every time a family, whether it's a school or something, when they do it together, it's a treat. And they treated themselves by working together. And all the things, and the silly is there, and they even had pumpkin parties. It strengthened the company, and that came from the changeover of George and Wave to Jim. They didn't have that social push. And Jim did.
So you said you went to the bathtub races.
I went to the bathtub races. I wasn't part of it.
What were they like? What were they?
Oh, just a bunch of men that had too much beer and had been so pleased to have made these crazy entries. I simply remember them being comfortably, successfully silly events for the employees.
That's good. That's a good way to put it. Is there anything else, Sue, that we haven't covered that you want to cover in terms of the family history and the company history and your
There was
history?
something we mentioned, and I wanted to be part of that. It was something about history.
Floods, the earthquakes,
the move. The move. You know where the North Pacific apartments are?
Oh, yes.
That was where George H. Wilson was.
Yes, no, I've seen those pictures as well. Yeah, and that was because of the flood, right? That it moved, or was it because of the earthquake?
Actually, that's an interesting part. I don't know the cause or the whys, but it was time. In fact, downtown Santa Cruz weren't so very pleased that there were large trucks coming and going, and they wanted more socially acceptable. I'm not socially, but maybe so. They didn't want an active business. They can ride your little bicycle to work, but you don't have trucks coming and going around the clock.
Yes.
And it was encouraged to move. And let's see. George was very much part of that. And just before we left on a trip, George pulled me aside and said, while you're gone, and I can't quite put this all together, I'm rearranging the office, and I'm going to add a wing. And he told me what this was for the estimating group. The estimation is really a major role. And Jim was the single role for so many years. He was telling me how I have my tickets in the hand for the next day, and he's telling me all of his changes. And probably was one last I'm boss move. Mm-hmm. We're in the airplane to wherever we were going here in the United States, and Jim says, I have something very exciting and a big surprise. it looks like we're going to move to, I'm losing this a little bit, over next to Plantronics.
Yes.
And he didn't know. I had to go from my seat in the airplane to the bathroom to cry. Because Jim didn't know that his father was playing one of his last hands. That Jim wouldn't get that I'm going to build in Harvey West next to Plantronics. So it was numbers of years, and I totally, history will tell you, when the decision of feeling that they needed more growth and that this town really wasn't so hot on trucks coming and going. And they weren't just trucks. By then they're great big trucks.
Yeah.
So those decision making to move to Harvey West, but that was a great big thing. And I don't know if George saw that. I think he did. I think he did because Jim would say, "Oh, we have a crane built in Monterey today," or at Wrigley Gum or at the university, and he'd take his father up to do all that. So I guess he did know the move. I know he knew the move, but I mean, I don't know physically he was part of it.
Right. Wow. That's interesting, and how it affected him.
Yes, yeah, because they, I know, I wanted to say the move and the continued of a strong, sound company brought about shortly before Jim's death, maybe 1 or 2 years before. Oh, I'm sorry.
It's okay.
Shortly before. Shoot, I'm losing it. Well, we hold. Can we hold for a while?
Yeah, we can hold for a while.
Yeah, I'll hit the other room. Turn the teapot on.
We're good. Yeah, I was almost basically done. I was just curious, like I said, if you had anything else, any other memories.
Well,
Yeah, we can take a break.
So we'll come back to the sale.
The sale. Oh yes, the act of the sale.
The act of the sale.
Okay.
So.
We'll come back to that. And
Okay. All right. I need my cart or whatever.
Yep. We'll get your walker.
There you go. Well, you've been very patient. Goodness.
Yeah.
Where did you kids grow up? All Aptos? Watsonville. Oh, I have lovely feelings for Watsonville. I'm a painter, and a lot of my classes were.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
You got it.
There we are. You want to take that off, or we can put here.
We can just put it right here.
Put it in there.
Yeah.
Okay. And how much leeway do I have?
You got plenty of leeway.
Okay.
If you want to
All
leave
right.
it on. Yeah.
Okay. Oh, our fire went out. Do you want to throw another little bag in? Those bags are marvelous.